Anyone reading in 1855 the new book of poems by Walt Whitman called Leaves of Grass had to be amazed at the vibrancy and surging, exultant celebration of our humanity in the poem's wildly sensual and synesthetic play of touch and sound and scent and taste and sight. I will go to the bank by the woods and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. My own breath echoes, ripples, and buzzed whispers, lover root, silk thread, crotch, and vine, the female equally with the male I sing. I believe in the flesh, and the appetite, seeing, hearing, and feeling are miracles, and each part and tag of me is a miracle. Divine am I inside and out as are you, and I make whole whatever I touch or am touched from. The scent of these armpits is an aroma finer than prayer. Now, as beautifully audacious as the scent of these armpits is an aroma finer than prayer, I'm sure if you love someone, the scent of their armpits is a prayer. So here, in the spirit of Walt Whitman, is a celebration of the beauty of the armpit or the underarm in art and in photography. To start our exploration of underarms and art, than with the Italian Renaissance painter Titian's poesy paintings, each inspired by a scene from Ovid's poem Metamorphosis. This is from his Venus and Adonis. Don't go, Adonis, stay with me. Come back to bed. I can't. I have hunting to do. And so Adonis pulls from his beloved and strives off towards his doom. And here is Titian's Perseus and Andromeda, and we are witnessing here a moment of release that is going to take Andromeda from unfair punishment and bondage and imminent death from the sea monster Cetus to a pretty successful life that includes marriage with her rescuer. Tamara de Lempicka was a master of glamour, sensuality, and deco style. Regardless of her subject, she would find ways of infusing whoever she painted with a sense of glamour, erotic intensity, and an inimitable Lempicka edginess. Painting the fabulous Parisian singer Susie Solidor, Lempicka tried out a number of poses, none of them quite right. Then the inspiration. Susie, lift up your arm above your head. Ah, perfect. And so it was.
Un vieux galant qui retira son panama, lui murmura des mots tout bas. Le petit rat ne répondit pas. Pressa le pas, puis
understood so much about distilling the physicality of her models down to essential colors and forms. One of her most alluring qualities is that she will often distort the bodies of her models according to what the viewer would see only if they were positioned extremely close to the subject. This lends an intimacy and fierce eroticism to Lempicka's work that is so far from the sort of distanced keyhole or behind-the-curtain voyeuristic perspective we get in a great deal of 19th century Academy art. This drawing the viewer into intimate proximity with her models is never more gorgeously at play than in the series of portraits Lempicka did of her beloved Raffaella. Raffaella, or La Bella Raffaella as Lempicka would call her, was a Parisian prostitute she encountered in the red light district of Paris, where she would go to people watch. Seeing Raffaella on the street, Lempicka was instantly struck by her distinctive beauty and aura and earthiness and solicited her to model for her over quite a few sessions of paintings. Before long, they became deeply involved lovers, and Lempicka generously shares her intimacy and adoration with the viewer. Ask yourself, where are you positioned as a viewer in this painting? And the answer is extremely close to Raffaella's lower knee and right elbow. In fact, we are drawn into a sort of constant spatial back and forth, or dynamism, where we shift in space, first close to her knee and then close to her elbow. In a formal sense, there's something quite amazing about this, because it's something that was happening elsewhere in painting, in Cubism, where the perspective of the viewer is constantly in flux. And so that Cubist effect is very much at play in this non-Cubist painting. So really, As visually we move back and forth between elbow and knee, we're so close to Raffaella's gorgeous midriff, the curves of which are so visible beneath the stunning orange fabric. There at the very middle of the painting is a visual symphony on the variations of orange within this already charged and eroticized space. I adore this painting, and for me, it's one of the most erotic works of art ever. One reason is that we are drawn in so very close to Raffaella that the visuality of the painting starts in an imaginary sense to compound with other senses. It's what I would call the synesthetic effect, where on some level, in our minds, Raffaella's imagined sounds and sense and total physicality drifts into the effect of the painting, with its intimate and dynamic visuality spilling out over into the other senses. That is pretty heady, decadent stuff, and in spite of the sort of safe dynamic of paintings upon a gallery wall, it is a fiercely absorptive work, and the viewer is drawn into that maelstrom of desire and heat. And we are back to Whitman with the scent of her armpits and the scent of everything else for that matter, an aroma finer than prayer. As to the painting's intense and layered eroticism, it's a bit surprising to reflect that this portrait of Raffaella has not a single bit of nudity in the conventional sense. Lempicka's other Raffaella paintings are similarly intimately engaging of the viewer. I love the aquatic feel of the cobalt blue-green, as if the viewer themselves stands half submerged, and the water feels so beautifully right in a painting already soaked with passion and intimacy, since once again the perspective draws us in so very close to Raffaella, but this time to those most private places between her legs, a lover's portrait indeed. The paired image with this one shows Raffaella really lost in her own inward and intimate pleasures. And we're drawn even closer into Raffaella's inner identity in the next image, since painting of someone reading are always really about the mind of the reader. And in this image, she has fallen asleep reading, so we not only are drawn deep into the interplay of book and mind, but plunged into the world of her dreaming. It's so languorous and intimate and inward and sensual. And there's nothing idealized about this painting, and yet I feel like we're absorbed into something not just beautiful in a descriptive or adjectival sense, but into beauty itself in a deeply intimate visual translation of Lempicka's own love for Raphael. This was the blockbuster painting of the Paris Salon in 1863. People would jostle one another in front of it, angling for a better view. For my part, I don't like the impossibly idealized Venus floating on top of the water as if she is some kind of balloon. Yet, the anti-reality idealism about the human body is typical of the 19th century academic paintings, which were often obsessed with smooth, uniform, and blemish-free skin on impossibly idealized bodies where body hair or underarm hair was unthinkable. Then painters like Manet and Courbet rejected this unrealistic idealism in favor of a fascination with the truth of our being and bodies, and offended just about everyone in the process until their revolution of realism became the norm. 5 years after Cabanel's Birth of Venus, Courbet painted The Woman in the Waves. Don't you feel like you know her? And with her swollen breasts and nipples, she feels so pregnant. We are not in the world of idealized representations of the mythological birth of Venus, but in the quick of creation itself. Courbet's Woman in the Waves' very inward identity is essential to the power of the painting, and so is her immersion in the water enveloping her. It's all about pregnancy and birth and rebirth and water and the oceanic and creation, and yet it's as real as it gets, and yet comes vastly closer to the power of the myth of the Birth of Venus story than does the Cabanel painting. The two most famous and at one time infamous Manet paintings both feature the very real model and painter Victorine Morin. Both these works shook up the world of painting in complex and beautiful ways. But one way wasn't complex at all. It was simply that unlike the 10,000 idealized, unreal, and utterly body-hairless woman of academic painting, Victorine was painted with her armpit hair intact. Among the hundreds of 19th century paintings of Cleopatra, this 1865 painting by Mose Bianchi is one of my favorites. There's something so inward yet passionate about Bianchi's Cleopatra. Her beautifully hairy underarms just seem to celebrate her sensuality with a Whitman-esque delight, which makes Cleopatra feel so very beautiful and real. Okay, part 2 will take up the subject of underarms and art again, discussing such artists as Egon Schiele and Christian Schad. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It makes a difference.